This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here today joined by three very special guests, all the way from Short Hills Bench, Niagara. I have the Speck brothers, Matthew, Paul, and Daniel. How are the three of you today, gentlemen?
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you.
Super. Well, thank you for joining us in Good Food Revolution. I mean, I've never had the three of you on before. I've spoken to Dan a few times, but it's really nice to get the three of you together. Let's start at the very beginning. Now, I have heard this story many times over the last 30 years, but let's talk about the origins of Henry of Pelham for those people who perhaps don't know anything about it.
Well, I mean, the winery has been in existence. We were working together for 40 years now, I believe it. It's for little kids. We grew up in Toronto, and our parents ran a small high school there. Our dad was from Niagara, our mother from New York. And somewhere in the early 80s, they lost their mind and bought a piece of land in Niagara here and sent Matt and myself up here to spend our weekends and summers planting a vineyard and figuring it out when we were teenagers, essentially.
Now, you did have a historical connection to the land there, right?
That's right. Yeah, our ancestors settled here back in the 1790s. After the our first ancestor here, a guy named Nicholas Smith, was half Iroquois and Pennsylvania Dutch Mennonite, and he's Iroquois and was a translator with Butler's Rangers, which was a militia that fought with the British during the American Revolution. And at the end of the war, they couldn't go home, so they settled here. And Nicholas and his wife had 14 kids, and he was granted some land. His wife was granted land, 100 acres each, and then a bunch of the kids as well. So they had a bit of land out here, and they horse traded and put it all together. And they had 5 years to clear it, and if they did, they could keep it. And the government was trying to establish a settlement, so they did that, and the land fell along Pelham Road, which was an important road, sort of connected the area together. And so one of the sons, Henry, built an inn and a tavern and a toll gate on that road, and that's where we are right now. We're in the ballroom. That was built in the 1840s.
But he was quite the entrepreneur then.
Yeah, for sure. And he planted vineyards on the property as well back in the 1850s. There's been vineyards continuously here since the 1850s. And he started citing his name, Henry of Pelham. That's where the name came.
Now, that was actually a bit of a joke because it was at the time there was Henry Pelham, who was I believe, the third Prime Minister of the UK after Walpole and then the Earl of Wilmington, I think. Yeah, he was the third PM. I don't actually have this amazing history brain. I just did some research this morning and have a kind of photographic memory for that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so he was so that's Henry of Pelham was the kind of title he gave himself as a bit of a joke, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a jackass.
There's historical record.
We've kept the tradition all going.
Superb. So your parents bought this property. What was planted there at the time?
It was a pretty dilapidated Concord vineyard that we ripped out and spent. They bought it in 82, and then we recontoured the land and then spent almost a summer pulling all the rocks and the big stones and had to be cleared up. And then we planted it in 1984. So it had been in the family name since 1794. We bought it off one of our cousins.
So how did the foresight to uproot all of that Concord? Like, how did they see the future going with vinifera?
It's really our dad, and he wasn't an expert in wine by any stretch, but he was learning about European varieties and European wines, and it was clear that the future was not in making the traditional wines from Concord and Nebraska. But he wasn't by no means an expert because we went against the grain and planted tobacco noir, which, you know, soon to be pulled out by many growers. But we planted Riesling, and he spoke to a lot of the local, more progressive growers at the time, mostly some Europeans. There's a big German influx in the 80s. There's a lot of Riesling and, you know, going in the ground. So we planted a lot of Riesling as well.
There's an old climate map, because really in Niagara, where you can and can't grow certain varieties and whether it succeeds, it's less about soil. We have variable soils. Soils obviously have an impact on the wine, but they're not the limiting factor where you can and can't grow grapes. It's about climate, it's about weather. It's really about aspect and relationship of your vineyard or your site to Lake Ontario. And there's an old, there are climate records going back to the 1950s, I believe, and there was some very still accurate mapping done of the Niagara Peninsula, understanding and reporting those that relationship in those the 12-month cycle, the relationship, what locations and that relationship to the lake. And so it was actually after I did some land, just really for posterity, bought it, you know, family land. You know, just afterwards looking at that map and talking to growers and realized that, oh, there's actually a potential in this location to go stretch and grow some of these more difficult varieties like Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. But as Paul said, it was also very experimental. It's back when, and a bunch of other varieties in the 1960s too. So it was a lot of experimenting back then.
That was the that was the learn trial by fire era.
Now, as history has it, the three of you were actually put to work in said vineyards. What are your earliest memories individually of working the vineyards there? I mean, I've heard lots of stories over the years.
I learned that I didn't like it. I didn't like it that much, but I did learn to work in the vineyards very hungover. We were left up to our own up here, so we drank a lot of Labatt's Blue.
That was our favorite.
That was our favorite. Ate a lot of hot dogs, and back in the good old days, smoked a lot of cigarettes.
Oh boy!
And listened to a lot of rock and roll, and had kind of a good time.
They're walking.
With yeah, the things that can get dangerous. Go through a lot of headphones, right? They get ripped out. It was like the Lost Boys. We have normally called the Lost Boys back when we were there. It was kind of this crazy experiment. Our parents lived in Toronto. They were educators, so it's not like they were experts. And you know, we made friends with local grape growers, and they helped us out. And it was very experimental, and we learned quite a bit.
Yeah, I remember the most particularly unusual about it was that our parents never moved out here. In fact, our mom rarely came here.
Still doesn't come out here.
Dad would drop us, so he'd check in on us, and he would check in on us basically. That was about it, periodically, and we were signing on the checkbook and everything else right from day one. It was very independent, given we were teenagers.
It was great. He'd come by for maybe once a week or so and give us a couple $100 in cash. And as soon as he left, we'd get in the pickup truck, right to the beer store.
So at which point did you realize that your futures lay ahead in the wine industry?
Well,
there was intense gravity.
Things didn't go like amazing.
Yeah. So we were basically bankrupt in 1989, and so that puts the mind to focus. And so we and my father was ill, and shortly thereafter passed away, and so we had a financial situation to work through. And so we were having struggles financially, as many wineries do, especially in the startup phases, because it's such a long commitment and the long paybacks. But at the same time, we were writing the VQA rules, which I was very involved in. There's this new, there's only a few small premium wineries at that time.
Around at that,
And there's, sorry, go ahead.
who was around at that time? I'm curious.
My closest friends would have been the Schmidts from Vineland, Stony Ridge, Cave Spring, the Tenachettes, the Ross families, Zeraldo and Kaiser. Those were sort of the people that wrote the VQA, or few of them. There's really about 3 or 4 of us, frankly. But and there's this really enthusiasm. Everybody was a lot younger and very, in some ways, naively enthusiastic to take this on. And it was an exciting time. And that's, I think, when I said, you know what, I think we can make a go of this.
So how did you divide the roles? Did you assign them to your various skill sets, or did you just fall into them?
We were super lucky, and I think it happened really organically because we all nearly like followed. We all started on the farm. That's all what there was to do, and then as we all, you know, then when there was wine to sell, we all participated in that, and but it was, as time went on, line production in every area. Fortunately, as things grew, we could start to focus our roles. We each kind of landed into the areas we liked the best. And Paul said he didn't like the vineyard, and I weirdly enough actually really liked the vineyard.
Interesting, yeah.
Like it was actually going up. I didn't mind it. I've done plenty of wine dinners and things like that, but it's not really what excites me. So I actually liked the vineyard. I liked, as a kid, riding dirt bikes around here, and I made best friends, and still to this day are some neighboring farms that I became friends with. And, so it's what I liked, so I stayed with that. I think we all can film.
I like dinners, and I like.
You're all, I have to say, for natural salesman, you were one of the few salespeople. I'll say Charles Baker is in that as well, but one of the salespeople that I really enjoyed when they came to visit me, right? Because we'd have a good chat. Like I love that, right? You must miss doing that these days, don't you?
Yeah, you know, flying out to Montreal is afternoon.
Oh, right. Oh, so you're still doing that kind. Oh, wow, interesting.
For now, we have a bigger team out there, and I get to sort of work with those guys, and then there's some of these extra provincial, the smaller ingredients for like go and work with our import agents and whatnot there, and that's cool too. So breathe life into the brand because we still have a long way to go. We sell in 20-some countries, we sell in pretty much every province in some capacity. But there's lots of work to be done there, bringing our wines and Canadian wines into the Canadians. So I really enjoy that.
We still do our roles. I mean, the company's business has grown, but our roles are. We still do our. So I was doing this morning. I was a bit late getting here because some of our last deliveries of grapes are coming in. But we still do our roles every day. And I think ultimately really lucky that we organically fell into the roles that we actually enjoy. I love what I do still. So
I think that shows in our wines that, you know, every wine before it gets bottled, 2 out of the 3 of us have to taste it. And generally, it's all 3 of us with the winemaking team.
That's great.
And we approve every bottle. And it doesn't matter if it's our house wine or sibling rivalry, right up to Speck Family Reserve. We approve every bottling. And because we're that involved and that connected with it. It also helps the winemakers because if it doesn't work out, it's our fault.
So here's a question. Since those first plantings, and you've been witness to all of this, to where Henry of Pelham is today, what have been the most significant milestones for you along that time frame?